everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of FM20 Deja Vu with Rangers and Celtic. Welcome along. So this is the second episode. If you're new to this series, what we're going to be doing is playing a game against Rangers and Celtic. We control Rangers and the computer AI controls Celtic. And each week for 10 weeks, we're going to replay this match with one difference. And the one difference is the tactical setup that I use for the Rangers side. And we're going to be going through the 10 preset tactics that are inbuilt into the game. And the first one that we did last week was park the bus, the one down the bottom here. And this week, we're going for control possession. So park the bus was very much about defensively being solid and soaking up the pressure and remaining structured in your defensive work. But there was no way of getting back out again and actually impacting the opposition too much. We had one or two half chances, but in the second half, they overran us slightly and we lost the game quite comfortably in the end. So that was park the bus. But what I would say is that you guys picked out a load of very interesting things about that tactic and how it worked or didn't work and some opinions. So if you haven't, I'd go back to that video if I were you and just check through the comments and see what you agree with and disagree with, because we'll begin to get a bigger picture of what these tactics are like and how these tactics work for people and the things that you should be looking out for. So go check that out. It's really interesting stuff. So today we've got controlled possession and we still remain in the same structure of our formation, so nothing else changes other than the tactic. But what does controlled possession do for us? Well, it's on a balanced mentality to start off with. Attacking width is standard, so we'll be not hugging the touch lines but remaining compact enough to each other to be able to make those intricate little passes and maintain the possession. I would suggest if you look at our basic shape of the 4-2-3-1, what we're looking out for is where the triangles are. The two central midfielders and the attacking central midfielder create a triangle, and they'll be looking to keep the ball in amongst themselves, you would imagine. There's also another triangle between fullback and central midfielder and central defender down the right and then down the left. There's also another one between fullback and winger and central midfielder down the right and down the left. And there's one with the attacker, the striker, should I say, with the attacking midfielder, and then one or other of the two wingers. There's lots of triangles all over the pitch. Let's see whether that helps us to maintain possession, and that's the route out and up the pitch as we progress in the game. So we'll be playing out of defence, so it'll be quite a slow build up in terms of we're never going to boot it long and lose the ball in that respect. We're going to try and build through the team. The passing directness is short, obviously shorter. The tempo is lower because we want to be a little bit more accurate in those short passes. But do we get caught on the ball? Do we dwell on it too long? And then if they're playing a pressing tactic, does that suppress some of that too much and we lose the ball? Something else to think about as we go through the game. And we'll be working the ball into the box. We won't be taking pot shots or crossing from long. It will be intricate passes, trying to get that last bit into that penalty area for one of our forward players to try and get on the end of it. That's still all that's there for in possession. In terms of in transition, you can see that we counter press. So whenever we lose the ball, we push higher up against them. It doesn't mean that we're going to be too high up the pitch, but it just means that when the player with the ball approaches an area with players, we'll be pushing at them a little bit. But there's no specific instruction for when possession has been won, so we can kind of freely do whatever the scenario suggests that we should do at that time. But within the context of the other instructions that they've been given, it's going to be quite short, sharp passes in and around their local area, as it were, building up slowly to find where the outlets are to get up the pitch. In terms of the goalkeeper, he'll be distributing to the centre-backs, which talks into the building up from the back. And we'll be taking short kicks. So there's no point in him going long and trying to miss out our midfield, when you want the midfield really to try and control the game. That's where we need this game to be controlled from, is that midfield three, keeping that ball as much as is possible and letting people work around them. So that's all that's there for in transition. And then we've got out of possession. You can see that there's a high defensive line and a high line of engagement, but it's not the highest. There's still more you could do there. So we are sitting up the pitch. There might be a little bit of space behind us and we'd not have the most fast central defenders. There's a bit of an issue there possibly, so we'll look how that affects us. Maybe in reality we would need to drop that slightly deeper, but we're not going to do that. We're going with exactly the default settings just to see what they do. Defensive width is standard again, so we're not separating ourselves off too much in an age of social distancing. We want them to remain together slightly more than not. And then we've got a more urgent pressing style when we lose the ball, obviously, and prevent the short goal kick from the goalkeeping distribution. So when they've got the ball in their goalkeeper's hands, we try and stop him getting into that central defensive and sending it long, so we can potentially win the ball back. Something else to look for as well in the game. What that creates is a style that this particular group of players are reasonably familiar with, just because most people are. And a reasonable intensity. It's not huge. It's not going to wear them out too much, but a little bit of intensity. So we haven't changed the team because this gets reset every time we've played the match back to the start of the match, and we just reset again from there. So the players, we don't have to worry about their conditioning in this series at all. So what we've got is we've got McGregor in goal, Tavernier at right back, Berisic at left back, Katic and Golson in central defence, Jack, Davies and Arfield in central midfield, with Hadji on the right, Ojo on the left and Morales up top, with Edmondson, Flanagan, Kamara, Aribo, Stewart, Kent and Defoe on the bench. So let's get into this second episode using the control possession and see what happens. So exactly like last week, we've got it on comprehensive highlights just to give ourselves a bigger picture of how the game goes. And we get an early opportunity in the rain for Ojo to take a shot from the far side of the penalty box, but it's a bit wide really, a bit erratic and doesn't really trouble the goalkeeper. First opportunity for Celtic to have the ball. We win the ball back very comfortably, and Morales out to the right-hand side for Tavernier, doing an overlapping run at full-back position, and then he brings it back into midfield and keeps the ball, controls that possession. Exactly what we want, and there's another opportunity down the left-hand side. You can see that immediately his thought was not whipping those balls in, not just losing possession for the sake of having a go. It's about building up the play and getting it into that penalty box. Really interesting start. And we're putting on the pressure. We did a little bit in the first game against Celtic with Park the Bus in the first half. We were able to get out a little bit more than I thought we were going to do. Good challenge there by Hadji to get the ball back. So we were able to get out in the first half, and then Celtic worked us out a little bit in the second half specifically. I wonder whether that happened again today. But again, we're using our wide areas to bring it up the pitch a little bit, but then we're going central to go back out again and using those triangles of players, using the opportunity to make Celtic run for the ball rather than chase players with the ball. That's interesting to watch as it continues. Corner comes in, it doesn't really clear the first man, but Ojo picks it up on the edge of the box and we maintain possession again. And again, we structured so we just keep the ball. And Celtic can't do much unless they can get the ball from us. And so hopefully they wear themselves out in the first half chasing the ball and we can pick them off later, but we'll have to wait and see how it works. But look at these match stats so far. Celtic have hardly got out of their area, it feels like. And again, we're in. And again, there was a decent opportunity that time. And we unfortunately strike it straight at the goalkeeper and he parries it round for a corner kick. But the pressure is all ours so far. And the corner comes into the far post that time. Again, we pick it up on the edge of the box. And again, we work it very nicely and take our time just using the triangles of players down this right hand side on this occasion. Then the cross comes in and it's booted away eventually by Celtic, and you can see that they're under pressure. But look at these match stats again: 4 shots for us, none for them in the first 13 minutes of the game, and we're doing very nicely. What we'll find as the series continues is that one size doesn't fit all. If you want to progress with your club, it's more likely that you're going to find the three training slots for tactics and formations. It's worthwhile putting different ones in there of some sort, so you can use them in different parts of the game, depending on what the result is at the time, etc. That was a decent effort by Tavernier. And so, for example, you'll have an attacking formation and a defensive and a balanced one, and you'll start with a balanced, and if you go down, you'll go to attacking maybe, and if you go up a goal, maybe you'll go defensive, etc. And so what we're looking for is how these particular tactics fit into those patterns. So I would suggest that the controlled possession, rather than the park the bus, which was very withdrawn and very defensive and very structured, the controlled possession one is much more balanced. As we go down a goal, not quite, it was cleared off the line there. But yeah, the controlled possession is much more of a balanced structure. So you would start as this with your main tactic maybe, knowing that if in certain scenarios you can go more attacking or more defensive given the need. And this is a really good tactic to have if you've got a group of players in that midfield specifically that have got very, very good passing and composure and decisions and all that kind of stuff to make good choices about where they're putting the ball and who they're moving it onto next. You can see in the last couple of minutes Celtic have come back into the game a little bit, have managed to press us a little bit and win the ball back, but structurally in defence you can see the balanced approach means that we are paying attention to our banks of four, etc., for defence and midfield, and winning the ball back quite well at times, especially in the fullback areas, which is really good to see. And it led to another corner kick on this occasion again. So Berisic down that far side into the centre of the 6-yard box, but nobody was there for us, and it gets partially cleared again. And then Celtic from Edouard get a chance to counter-attack on that occasion, but it doesn't lead to anything. But it's really interesting. So they've been already spoken to, Celtic players have already been spoken to in terms of a shout or a team direction, because they've responded well to it. And you can see that that means that they've had things to sort out and things to figure out. Now, what we can't do in this series, just because we are specifically looking at each of these tactical ways of play, is that if Celtic figure us out, we can't necessarily change it ourselves. We maintain the structure that we started with just to see it play out in the game and what we are successful with and what we're not. So it might mean, as happened last week, that Celtic figure us out a little bit and do something different that causes us problems. But so far, I quite like the general play. I mean, you could go into the tactical instructions and tweak little bits of how you would want them to play slightly differently. Maybe you would want them to play at a slightly higher tempo than they are, and just, if you've got those clarity of decision makers and composure on the ball in terms of, you know, those central midfield players, maybe that's something you can up the tempo slightly and move the ball even quicker. But you'd have to have quite good players to do that maybe. But you can see that we're doing pretty well, and the balanced approach really aids the situation. You know, I often play with a balanced kind of central main tactic, just because it does what it says. It balances everything. You've got some attacking qualities, but you've got structure in your defence as well. And like last week, I think we lost a couple of goals last week off little mistakes, etc., on free kicks and corner kicks and set pieces in general. And it seems to have done us in a little bit here as well. At the near post, it was just a very decent corner kick in, and a good early header in the near post, and our defenders didn't read it. One thing that you can never quite sort of prepare for when you're setting out your team, of course, is for individual errors and individual players not to quite do what you ask them to do. And there's a couple of opportunities to see that that's the case with this Rangers setup already in the first couple of games. And it happened again there, that I think, you know, they were just a little bit slow to react in terms of the corner kick. But that's nothing to do necessarily with the tactic, I don't think, specifically. But again, we've come back quite nicely from that, and leading into half time we've still putting the pressure on, and we're still giving a good account of ourselves, which is really encouraging to see. I'm pleasantly surprised, considering last week we got absolutely decimated, really. After the first half, when it was a bit more structured, we really struggled. We'll see what the second half brings, because there's the potential that Celtic will now go and change everything about their setup. Oh, that was quite fortunate. They've had some good opportunities when they've broken through, haven't they? But again, we managed to eventually clear it. One thing that we're not doing in this game is that we're not going to be changing much of the personnel, and we're not going to be doing team talks, etc. I don't want to impact their body language other than what the tactic is doing for them, and seeing what that tactic, how that they respond to the tactic. So that means that there's nothing really to say, and there's no one really to change at this point. We can make substitutions, potentially if we want to, or we need to through injury and stuff, but we don't have to, because we don't have to worry about what's coming up next in terms of their schedule, because we'll be resetting this game and playing this game again next week. So it is, as I say, just about the tactic. And so far, Celtic are 1-0 up. And I think we gave a good account for ourselves in the first half in terms of general play and putting some pressure on them early doors. But you can see that the balance of the game has shifted and Celtic have come back out at us. They've figured us out a little bit. And what that's meant is that they've now put a bit more of a press on our ball possession and they've won it quicker up the pitch and countered on us quicker. And again, it demonstrates that need to potentially have a couple of different ways of play in your structure, just because different teams will figure you out at different points in the game. I think too many Football Manager players potentially, and I count myself in this at times, are too focused on something that has worked at some point, so use the same thing and then expect it just to continue to work. Whereas the game is a little bit more intricate than that and a little bit cleverer than that. And there are managers out there that will set up their team in slightly different ways that will cause you problems. And so you've always got to have a plan B and a plan C, potentially. So what's happened there? Barisic was offside. That was unfortunate. I hope all of this makes sense to you. Again, what I'm looking for from you in the comments below after this particular video that you've watched the game is tell me what you noticed. Tell me what you thought about the structure of this tactic. Tell me how you use it or don't you use it. Why do you use it? Why don't you use it? What sort of team are you using it with? And just let me know what you notice as well. Get that conversation going in the comments below. And as I say, go and check out last week's as well and see what you agree and disagree with what other people have said about the park the bus tactic, which did have some positives as well as some issues in terms of just making that a main style of play. But again, we have another offside, this time down the right hand side, but we are still in the game. It's a much closer affair on this occasion until we do silly things like that and the ref wants a word with Arfield. Surely it can't be more than a yellow card. Let's hope not. Oh no, he gets away with a warning. Okay, so that's fine. At least we can keep 11 men on the pitch, hopefully all the way through these, and just let the tactic play out. But yeah, I think so far what you notice is it lacks a little bit of, what do you want to call it, dynamism, in the sense of you move the ball well, but there comes a point where it has to be a little bit more dynamic and you've got to shift up the tempo and lower it occasionally just to cause problems for your opposition. And, also change to other tactics now that we're down a goal. Maybe we need a more attacking, more pressing, more structured way of play to put more pressure on Celtic now, and we can't do that in this series, but you can see the benefit when you can see only one tactic being figured out. You can see the benefit of putting multiple in there. But I quite like the setup of this Rangers side. There's enough about them to suggest that they're competitive against Celtic, who are obviously at the moment a little bit ahead of them in their development as a club. But there's enough there. So I think if somebody wants to play a Rangers save, I think that you've got a good starting point at least, and still the might of Celtic to overturn to win silverware, etc. So there's a real challenge in there. But having been drifted down the leagues a little bit for various reasons and brought themselves back up again, they're obviously just on the cusp of really properly challenging again, it feels like, which is really positive for them. In Football Manager terms, it just means that Celtic have got one or two better players, and there are one or two weak spots in this Rangers setup that mean that occasional player mistake happens and other bits and pieces just because the quality is a bit lower. But 74 minutes in, and I've kind of just been chatting about random stuff that comes in my head, but you'll have the opportunity to rewind and replay a little bit more than I will once this video is out, to figure out what you've seen and what you've noticed. But I think you can see the triangles here slightly in operation. There's sort of 3 or 4 players there, all creating space for the ball to move in and options for the ball to move in, whilst making the opposition players chase and wear themselves out, which is positive. Good ball into midfield, nicely moved on quite quickly at that point, but very structured possession in terms of taking the easy pass, and that was a really good chance, wasn't it? Just because, this is the other thing I wanted to say about something like controlled possession, just because one of the instructions is to work the ball into the box and not use crossing too much, it wasn't picked as a way to get it into the box, doesn't mean they won't. It doesn't mean that they can't make on-the-cuff decisions, and working it into the box to a player that's in a particular movement of a run and finding him with a pass is as much working it into the box as anything else is. So it doesn't mean you'll negate some of the other ways of play just because you've got some instructions. That's why you need to find players that have got good decision making and composure and other bits and pieces to know that they can make the right calls along the way. But what it just means is that you'll veer towards your main style of play more often than not, I would suggest. If other people have got a different view on that, let me know in the comments below. But that's how I read the game in terms of my experience of it. We've got 10 minutes to go in terms of game time on this one, and it looks like we're going to possibly go down to a slightly unfortunate loss, but it's much closer until they go and score now or something, probably off another free kick or corner, sort of set piece. Set piece is the thing I was trying to find in my head, couldn't find the words. But yeah, from another set piece is sometimes our downfall, it feels like. But on that occasion, we actually survived it, didn't we? So there's no issue there. And we get a chance to work the ball up down this left-hand side, but the fullback closes down the space and takes the ball away. I would say for Celtic, it's probably slightly frustrating that they haven't been able to take this game totally by the scruff of the neck. But we got such a good start, and you can see that I think we've come back into the game a little bit in the second half as well, which is really encouraging. Just keeping that balanced, structured approach in terms of controlled possession means that what happened last week was that they figured out the defensive tactic, and we had no way of getting out from our shape. On this occasion, we're just keeping the same structure in that middle part of the pitch, and there we've always got options to go to. And the full-time whistle went, and Celtic on this occasion did beat us 1-0. But the match stats show a very different picture than the one you would expect necessarily. And I think that we did quite well. I think there was plenty of opportunity to see in that particular way of play the triangles working, the ball movement working, therefore opposition chasing shadows a little bit here and there. And we were able to get a few chances, not so many in the second half, but a few in the first half more so. And if you were able to change your tactic up, there's a perfect opportunity. You get to half time, you've frustrated them a bit, you may find yourself at 0-0, 1-0 down or whatever. Second half, you can come out and really force something if you change your tactical approach. So it's worth having a look at all of these scenarios and all of these different tactical structures and seeing what you would use in what circumstance. And that's basically what FM20 Deja Vu is about. It's about identifying what works and what doesn't work. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me how about your experience of using the controlled possession and how you might tweak it or not tweak it to change how it works slightly. And next week we'll come back in and we'll choose another style of play just to see how that impacts the game. And by the end of the series, we'll be asking the question of us all, which three of these tactics, if you had to use three in the three slots that you've got, would you put together to create some form of tactical way of play that covers all scenarios as much as is possible for any given game, whether you're winning, losing, drawing, whatever. So yeah, that'll do it for today. I hope you find these interesting. I know it's a bit rambly from me. There's nothing I can really prepare to talk about necessarily. I focus on what's happening in the game and just what the different tactics have to say in terms of what we're looking for. But I hope you find them interesting. If you do, let me know in the comments below and tell me all about what you think about this particular structure of play. I quite liked it. I think it was quite useful. Thanks for joining me. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click that like button if you haven't already. But until next time, take care of yourselves. I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.